And we're live. Look at that.
Wow.
All right. So, I'm
Welcome.
Minx.
I'm
This is
Body.
Scotty.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's me. Welcome.
Yeah.
We're going
We're
to read you
here.
some scary stories because we
Yeah.
don't have an intro yet.
No, we don't. We didn't
We didn't think that far
got
ahead
prepared.
yet. That's
We just
like
yeah. That's like episode 3. Okay, we'll get there.
we'll work on it. We'll workshop it. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I have a long one, so if I go first, we're in it. You can start. I can do one, then you can finish, or I can
Let me
get it all
do
out.
I have a shorter one. I'll do that one
Okay,
first.
go ahead.
All right. So,
And who's the.
the author. I am
Yes.
This one is da, 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 da. I had it saved on my phone, and now I don't have it saved
Are
on
you
my
starting with the
phone.
third one? It's in the Discord chat.
uh, so the first one I'm reading, the title is "The Screaming Started Outside My Room. Now it's coming from inside," and that is written by. Oh my goodness, where is it? I just had it. Why am I like this? Help!
Frieden? Is it Frieden or Frieden?
I think it's Friday.
Frieden7654.
And you can find them on Reddit. I found this
Mm-hmm.
story on, is it r/nosleep?
Yes, r/nosleep
Yep.
posted
I
about 7 months ago.
I did it. I always say it the wrong way, and I get made fun of every time. All right, you ready? Okay.
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So the screaming started outside my room. Now it's coming from inside. It started late at night. I can clearly remember. Pam was already drifting off as we talked about how loud the music was at the concert we'd been to. After all these years of metal concerts, we agreed things have definitely been louder this time. Hell, we were discussing getting earplugs for the next one. The Airbnb we picked for the night was close to the venue, but in a pretty sketchy area. One of those old buildings with long hallways and thin walls where you can hear everything your neighbors are doing. We were lying in bed, and just when we thought we talked ourselves to sleep after all the random rambling, the first scream came. It was almost asleep when I heard it. Help me, please! The high pitched cry was distant, but clear enough that it jerked me awake. It sounded like someone sobbing while they screamed, like a pure desperation mixed with terror. It seemed to be coming from somewhere outside the building, maybe from the street below, but it was hard to tell with these old walls and the way sound carries through the hallways. What was that? I asked, hoping Pam was still awake. Hmm? She mumbled, rolling over to face me. Did you hear that? She was quiet for a moment, listening. Sound like help me please, maybe? My heart started beating faster. It was 2:58 a.m. according to the nightstand clock. Who the hell would be screaming for help at this hour? That's weird, right? I mean, yeah, but Pam shrugged, though I could see she was more awake now. This isn't exactly the nicest neighborhood. There's probably homeless people around. Who knows? That made sense. The area around the venue wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. Lots of dive bars, some sketchy motels. The kind of place where you might expect to hear someone having a rough night. Still, something about the voice bothered me. It was so desperate. We lay there in silence for a few minutes, starting to think maybe it was just a one off thing when it happened again. Help! This time it was definitely closer. Not from the street, from somewhere inside the building. Maybe the floor below us or down the hallway. The sound seemed to bounce off the walls in a way that made it hard to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. Okay, what the fuck was that? I added, sitting up in bed. It was definitely closer this time, Pam said. I could feel her tense up beside me. That sounded like it was coming from inside the building. That's messed up. My heart was really pounding now, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to freak out Pam, and honestly, I didn't want to admit how scared I was getting. This kind of thing happens sometimes in my neighborhood, Pam said, though her voice didn't sound as confident as her words. People having episodes or just drunk hobos. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. The way the voice echoed, the desperation in it. It didn't sound like a normal argument or someone just being loud. It sounded like genuine terror. We both lay there listening, but everything was quiet again. Just the occasional sound of a car passing by outside, and the building settling around us. Old buildings make a lot of noise, I told myself. Pipes creaking, floors shifting. Nothing unusual about that. I was starting to relax when I heard the third voice. Here. It wasn't a scream this time. It was barely a whisper, but somehow it echoed inside my head like it was being shouted through a megaphone. The word felt loud, impossibly loud, even though I could tell it was spoken quietly. This time I shot straight up in bed, my eyes open. That hadn't come from the hallway or another room. That had come from inside our room, from the corner near the little kitchenette. Did you, did you hear that? I stammered. Pam didn't answer, but I could feel her sitting up beside me. I reached for the light switch on the wall behind me, fumbling in the dark. I flicked it up, down, several times, but nothing happened. Of course, the fucking lights weren't working. Shit, I muttered, reaching for my phone on the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I felt around for it, knocking over my Kindle, almost sending my water bottle crashing to the floor. Where the hell was my phone? That's when I heard it. A whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. Help me. The voice was raspy, like someone who'd been screaming for hours until their throat was raw. But it wasn't coming from outside anymore, or the hallway. It was coming from the corner of our room, maybe 10 feet away from where we were sitting on the bed. My blood went cold. Someone was in here, with us. I finally found my phone, fumbled with the flashlight. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady, but when the light came on, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a dark shape in the corner. Tall, but hunched over, standing perfectly still. I couldn't make any details, just a human shaped shadow that seemed to absorb the light from my phone rather than reflect it. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but I couldn't move. My whole body felt frozen, like if I made even the slightest noise, whatever was standing there would notice me. My heart was beating so loud, I was sure it could hear it. The shape started to move, slowly. It felt as if time was being suspended, but also flying by, but also running out. I turned my head slightly to look at Pam, desperate to see if she was seeing this too, if she had any idea what we should do. What I saw made everything worse. Pam was sitting in bed, but her body was facing away from me, while her head was turned toward me at an impossible angle. Like someone had grabbed her head and twisted her around without moving her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, but they weren't her normal brown eyes. They were white, completely white, like someone painted over them. The only thing I could see clearly in the darkness was those horrible white eyes staring right at me. Then her mouth started to open, slowly, wider and wider, until her jaw was hanging open further than any human mouth should be able to go. The white glow from her eyes cast just enough light for me to see into her mouth, and it looked like it went on forever, just darkness stretching back into nothing. Then everything went black. When I woke up, it was morning. I could hear traffic outside, normal sounds, normal light. I sat up in bed, my head pounding like I had the worst hangover of my life. Pam was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed with her back to me, brushing her hair. My hair is such a mess, she said without turning around. You were talking in your sleep all night. Bad dreams? Yeah, I guess, I said. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming. I had this really weird nightmare. Must have been some nightmare, she said, still not turning around. Kept saying, help me, over and over. But the weird thing is, she finally turned to face me. Her eyes were completely white again. I wasn't asleep either. The end.
Oh. Oh, wow.
It's spooky.
Oh, wow. That is spooky. Oh,
Oh my god, I couldn't. I
kinda
would have
my
just got up and
skin
left.
crawl a little bit. I
I'd
know,
been
like,
like,
I was
goodbye. Bye,
there's no
Pam. See you
Airbnb worth
later.
it. Like,
Keep
just
my
leave.
security deposit. I gotta go. Oh.
Oh my god, that's such a wow, they did a really good job, though.
Mm-hmm. I really liked that one.
I think that was an excellent first story.
That was very good. So very good. The next one I have is
Oh,
a little longer.
mhm.
I believe it's gonna become a series. I
Okay, do
will
you wanna
say it's got a little bit of more body horror to it,
okay. Do you
but
wanna end
not
on
too
that
bad.
one? Since we might be picking up if they do a part 2, do you wanna end on that one? Or do you wanna go ahead and go?
Why don't you do yours? and then
Okay.
I'll do the next one.
Okay.
So, your turn.
My
Enthrall me.
turn. Oh my god.
Enthrall
I don't
me.
know. I don't know if I can live up to that. Okay. So I I think I told you I was going to originally do a different story, but then I saw this one the other day and I was just like I could not do it. And the author did give permission, so it's going to be random appellation 468 on Reddit. We should definitely have all the links for all the authors below. But yeah, I just kind of got pulled into this one, so I hope you enjoy it.
Let's go. I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm prepared.
All right. The blaring of my cell phone jolted me awake, and I sat up with a groan. I'm getting too old for this. In front of my ragged couch, the TV continued with its black and white parade of old footage from a World War I documentary, though the war seemed nearly over now. Judging by the digital clock on the mantelpiece, which read 3:49 a.m., I'd been asleep for at least 5 hours. My body ached, a familiar problem at my age, but enough that I chided myself for not going to bed earlier like a responsible person. It had been a long day, so I came home to a cold shower, a few hot dogs warmed in the microwave, and settled down to watch some television before bed. Of course, at 55 years old, I'd misjudged how tired I really was, and spent close to half the night slumped on my sofa, which meant I would be paying for it in the morning with stiff joints and a sore back. Palming my cracked Motorola from the coffee table, I found the TV remote and hit the mute button as I answered the call. Hello? Shaky breath grated on the other end, and after a few moments, a girl's hushed voice whispered through, Mr. Todd. Ice rippled through my veins at the sound of Cindy's panicked voice. As I sat up straighter to rub at my bleary eyes. Yeah, I'm here. You okay? What's wrong? Silence greeted me, and a strange mix of static, trembling breaths, and what sounded like sniffles as she tried to hold back tears. Please, help me. Cindy, concern building in my mind, I switched on a nearby lamp and pulled myself from the couch with a grunt at the frightness in my lower back. You there? What's going on? More shaky gasps followed, and just over the static, I thought I heard the faint sound of a melodic humming in the background. Something's wrong, Cindy whispered, her words so quiet that they made each breath sound like cannon fire. The woods are. Something fell out of the sky, and it was so loud it woke me up. There's a fire. Brow furrowed, I moved fast for the kitchen, stumbling through the dark interior of my little cabin to grope for the light switch. Stay calm, just stay calm and talk to me. You said there's a fire? How far away? Can you get to your car? Another sniffle came through, clogged with the harsh interference as the signal weakened, a sound that made my veins throb with tension. I I can't. Something's here. It's in the house. It's in the house with me. We can't get out. The throat tried to close up, and I gulped hard against a wave of nausea. Someone broke in. Are you hurt? Where's Aaron? A long pause, and in the background of the mute static, I could have sworn the humming sound cut out, as though whatever had stopped their eerie melody all at once. She's gone. Something in Cindy's tone changed, as if the fear drained away to a blank, emotionless rasp, and the line went dead with a chilling click. Every inch of my body racked with a shiver, and both feet seemed glued to the floor in a strange form of dread. Like so many girls before them, Cindy Fadro and Erin Martinelli had been hired on to be caretakers and actors in the Wickenshire Living History estate. Erin was 19, studying to be a nurse, while Cindy had just graduated high school and wanted to be a teacher. They were good kids, calm, intelligent, and great workers. Though I never had any children, they were like daughters of my own, and they even baked a cake for my birthday in June. Once they called me in for a leaky pipe, but only after they had done their best to fix it themselves with a toolkit I'd left in the stairwell cupboard. Small little troopers that they were, the girls even had the common sense to shut the correct valve off and found the leak on their own. Had it been anyone else, I might have considered this to be a prank, a joke, some dumb idea made by bored kids to get a new video for their social media nonsense. But I knew Cindy and Aaron. They didn't pull pranks like this. Unnerved, I tried to redial her number but got no answer. Aaron's number yielded the same result, and I shook my head at myself. Screw it. I'm not taking any chances. I was midway through yanking my work boots on when the sheriff picked up. Hello? From the gruffness of his words, I could tell that he'd been asleep as well, but I couldn't waste time with the standard 911 procedures. David, it's me. I cinched down the laces of my boots and grabbed my Carhartt jacket from its hook by the door. Cindy just called from the Wickenshire place. There's a fire on the mountain, and I think someone's broken into the house. I'm headed there now. Rustling on the opposite end of the phone let me know David was up, likely going through the same motions as myself. The son of a Polish man and a Kutentai woman, David Kowalski and I had known each other since high school and even played football on the same team. Nicknamed White Cloud for his European features and Native American blood, he was stubborn with a quick temper, but tenacious when it came to his job. As a lawman, he drove his deputies relentlessly, backed them to the hilt when it came to any court battles, and as a result, he'd managed to keep the crime in Jacob's Fork quite low over the years. We didn't always see eye to eye on everything, but I knew I could count on him when it came to something like this. If Cindy or Aaron were in danger, Sheriff Kowalski would ride through hell and back to get them out, which was exactly the kind of man I needed right now. I'll get the horn to a few of my boys and have them meet you there, he replied. I had heard the zipping of a coat on his end, along with the metallic click of a gun slide being racked. Fire teams are going to need time to get spun up, so whatever happens, don't get wandering off without letting me know. Last thing I want is us getting caught in the flames if they decide to move down the mountain. I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me, and kept the phone pressed to my ear as I swiped my truck keys from the porcelain ashtray near the front door. Got it. Be careful, Andy. His voice hitched in a low pause, as if the sheriff himself had a bad feeling about this. Same as I did. And he hung up. Rain pattered on the windshield of my ancient pickup truck as I wound my way through the dark back roads of northern Idaho. The night sky black with the clouds of late fall. On the sun-faded seat next to me lay my work kit, a simple, heavy-duty canvas tool bag that held various tools, keys, a flashlight, and an old revolver handed down to me from my grandfather. I used the tools in my job every day as the groundskeeper, janitor, and fix-it-all handyman for the Wickenshire house, which had been part of our small town for as long as anyone could remember. Set on a picturesque 103 acres of fields and woodland in the shadow of the nearby Smoke Point Mountain, the Wickenshire house was a rare example of Eastern architecture in the far reaches of the American West. It was the property of our town's oldest resident, Mr. Edward J. Watkins, a kind, if forgetful soul who'd seen 91 years on this earth and still could drive his own car, though he had a little trouble with the stairs. He lived in a cottage on the western edge of town, but I wasn't about to call him at this time of night, even for something so urgent. Knowing Ed Watkins, he would try to drive out to the house with his slippers on and get hurt stumbling around in the flames. Or run into whatever scumbag is in the house, God forbid. On the horizon, some of the clouds began to glow, an orange flicker that widened on the mountainside as the distant fire spread. I could barely glimpse an odd plume of smoke in the sky, not curved upward from the fire, but downward in a long arc, backlit, backlit by the flames. Looking at it, I had a momentary lapse of courage, my resolve wavering. Cindy had said something, fell from the sky, but this looked like a trial of some kind. Maybe a crashed plane or a fallen weather balloon. If there was a jet fuel on the ground, the fire could even be worse to put out than usual. It was horrible, rotten luck all the way around. A wildfire on the same night the house had its first break-in while the girls were there alone? Adrenaline pumping, I sped up the lonely gravel trail to the house, one of the final sections of the public roadways that got this close to the mountain. The Wickenshire house reared from the gloom ahead, its tall gates and Victorian gables illuminated by the dual halos of my truck's headlights. It still took my breath away, the ornate beauty of the place, built as if every stone had been placed by a perfectionist's hand. It stood at 2 stories in height, built from the stone mined at the local quarry, with multiple chimneys, a balcony overlooking the back garden, and a grand front porch that wrapped halfway around the entire structure. A stone wall encircled the main grounds, with a wrought iron gate at the drive and several ornamental gardens interspersed throughout. Plush lawns stretched in between, and there were a few oak trees planted there for brilliant colors in the fall. A small garage had been built around the back of the house sometime in the 1960s, but this mainly held the riding lawnmower and a small shop where I did most of my repair work. Cindy and Aaron's cars were parked back there, the front gravel lot reserved for visitors during the daily tours. I didn't see any other vehicles that might indicate an intruder could have used them, but something else caught my attention in that moment and held it with a pull like gravity. Lord have mercy. I stared, slack-jawed, at a huge sea of flames that roared through the nearby trees with a voracious appetite. The fire hadn't wasted any time, chewing through the wet growth as if the rain had never fell, evergreens crackling as they burned to dust in minutes. The heat came through my windshield in a steady increase, warm enough that I couldn't tell the difference between the fire and my truck heater. The open grassy slopes around the house were consumed as if the flames inched closer to the building, and fire closed in from both east and west. Bounding from my truck, I dashed up the front door and pulled the handles. The polished brass knobs rattled but didn't turn, the flames licking their way across the prairie grass outside the ornate courtyard walls. Locked. That means our scumbag didn't break in through here. Maybe he went around the back? With shaking hands, I put the canvas tool bag and dug in for my keyring. Sirens began to wail in the distance, and I finally managed to force the doors open, leaving the keys in the lock to snatch my aged pistol. Cindy. I produced a flashlight in my left hand to hold beneath my gun and swept the beam of it over the musky interior. Aaron, where are you? I'd been in the house countless times over the years, but in that moment it felt suffocating, like a great stony maw waiting for me to go far enough in so as to swallow me whole. The foyer led to a large room with a grand staircase, doors on either side opening to the main dining room and sitting room respectively. Signs and velvet ropes were posted to guide visitors through the proper areas, a gift shop in the rear of the house, near the old parlor, along with the guest bathrooms added on the original back porch. With all the lights off, it looked alien, surreal for this part of the country with its Eastern Victorian mystique, and my skin prickled at the sensation that there were eyes in every shadow. Of course, I had been stupid to yell. I'd let my panic get the better of me, and now I had given away my element of surprise. If some creep was in the house somewhere with Aaron or Cindy doing God knows what, I wouldn't be able to sneak up on him now. All right then, might as well move fast. With the old revolver grasped in my trembling hands, I headed for the stairs and took them 3 at a time. The wood creaked under my steps, ancient chestnut and oak that had been sawn before the Great Depression, each footfall like a cannon in the silent house. From here, the roar of the fire outside seemed a muffled whisper, as though there were 2 different realities, and the house stood guard between them. However, I remembered the heat coming through the windshield of my pickup, and I knew I didn't have much time. Soon the house would be in flames and the fire outside enough to melt grass and ignite the wooden siding in minutes. I reached the top of the stairs and swept my flashlight beam down both ends of the corridor at the top, uncertain of which direction to go first. Cindy and Aaron were roomed down the hall to the left, but if someone had indeed broken into the house, Cindy might have hid somewhere else. Every second wasted could mean life or death, and I realized that either way, I'd be turning my back to the unknown. Something flickered in the beam of my light, a brief wisp of shadow that jerked back behind the far corner of the right side hallway. I didn't have more than a moment to see clear details, but there were enough of an image burned into my mind that it came to me in a cold rush. A face. Kowalski, you'd better get here soon. Swallowing, I paced down the hallway, my handgun leveled on the spot where the shadow had been. Upon reaching it, I inched in a wide arc around the corner, bracing for a figure to jump out at me. The air caught in my throat, and I stared at a section of wallpaper bathed in the aura of my flashlight. Brownish black sludge had been dabbed on the wall, smeared into a perfect circle so that the excess dripped over the wallpaper like ebony tears. I couldn't tell if it was mud, blood, or something else, but the corridor stank of rot and putrid scent of stagnant water. Thorny bits of twig had been woven together, tied here and there with bits of plant fiber to form a circle that overlaid the sludge. Pasted together on the wall, these seemed to make up a protective ring, and in the middle were handprints. From what I could see, they were two different sizes, slender fingers and narrow palms, indicating two younger females. Both prints faced downwards, slightly overlapping each other at the heel of the palm, and the thumbs arced towards one another like pincers. Unlike the grimy sludge, these were pressed to the old wallpaper in an unmistakable red hue, and it hit me what I was looking at. A spider. The four fingers of each hand made the legs, and the thumbs its mandibles. Upon closer inspection, I discovered the blackness of the outer paste came from petals, rose petals to be exact. There were no roses growing in Idaho this time of year, and I'd never seen a natural black rose in my life, yet these appeared fresh. Most had been ground to a powder that gave the foul substance a dark color. Others pushed into the muck like decorative flair, giving a strange, heady undertone to the mixture. With the discovery came more clarity. The thorny twigs glued into the circle were not random. They spread inward toward the spider, forming a sharp web of spikes that enshrined it. With the careful touch of an artisan, such a display would have taken hours to make. Certainly longer than the time it took for Cindy to call me. How is this possible? Mr. Todd. I nearly jumped out of my skin, the horrific cry echoing from somewhere behind me, Cindy's voice tinged in pain and fear. No sooner had I turned, running a short distance back toward the main corridor at the top of the stairs, and the voice cut out with a high, agonized scream. Cindy! I charged towards the girl's room, a heart pounding in my chest. Help me! Back in the direction of the symbol, Aaron's voice rang out, choked with sobs and full of torment. Mr. Todd, please! Acidic bewilderment slithered through my mind, and I skidded to a stop, caught in the middle of the hallway. The staircase just to my left. I had been so close, perhaps a door away from Aaron only moments ago. Could there be more than one intruder holding the girls in separate rooms? Cindy is closest. I have to get to her. She sounds like she's hurt. Teeth gritted against the screams of Aaron, I forced myself through the left side hallway, her voice ringing in my ears as she begged for my help. At the end of the hall, I reached the rooms given to the girls and lunged for the handle to Cindy's. It didn't turn, locked from the inside. Backing up, I drove the heel of my boot into the door next to the lock and heard the old wood splinter. Any other time, I would have balked at such destruction, these doors being over 80 years old. But it didn't matter anymore. What the fire didn't get would not be worth Cindy or Aaron's lives. The door swung open to slap against the bedroom wall, and I dashed inside, revolver in hand. What the? Within the quiet interior of the bedroom, everything looked untouched. The curtains partially open, the bed rumpled from where Cindy had gotten up to check the window, a discarded work uniform in the clothes hamper by the door. Dark stained wood trimmed lined the walls, windows, and doorways. The walls papered with a robin egg blue pattern that gave it an airy feeling. The white lacy curtains wafted like dogs. Clouded in the sight draft came in the pipes. There were modern touches as well. More lamps and lights plugged into the discrete electrical outlets in the walls. A small television on its stand across from the bed. and a side door opened to a shared bathroom between Cindy's room and Aaron's. This room wasn't open to tourists, and it was the private living quarters for our workers, so such things were permissible here, as opposed to the other parts of the house. Nothing seemed out of place, but there was no sign of Cindy anywhere. No clues to indicate that she'd been there moments ago. It was as if she'd gotten out of the bed, looked out the window, and vanished into thin air. In a flurry of moment, I checked under the bed, in the closet, and the bathroom. When those came back clean, I broke through the bathroom door into Aaron's room, only to find more of the same. There was no sign of the girls anywhere. Mr. Todd, please. Aaron's screams continued from the opposite end of the long corridor, and I flung open the bedroom door to retrace my mad dash in her direction, confused and frustration mounting. Rounding the corner that bore the strange mark on the wall, I swayed to a stop on the old floorboards next to the door, where her screams had come from, and yanked on the knob. You've got to be kidding me. How many doors did they lock before I got here? With a gasp of exertion, I backed up to kick the door in like the last one, muscles tensed for the effort. Mr. Todd! Cindy's cries exploded from the doorway behind me, rabid and intense as the door rattles on its hinges like she was throwing herself against it from within the room. I froze, staring at the door, heart racing as my mind whirled. How could she be in there? I had heard Cindy on the other side of the house not 5 minutes ago. There was no way she could have moved that fast, not without going past me. I would have seen her in the hall. I would have heard the ancient doors creaking on their hinges as they opened. She couldn't be in there. Please help me. Aaron's screams started up again, but this time from somewhere in the left side hallway, and another door began to groan in muted thuds as if she too were trying to break it down. A dry fear crept into my throat, different than what I had known coming into the house. This didn't make sense. Aaron's voice had been coming from the door I stood ready to break into, but now it was to my left. Cindy's had been coming from her room in the west wing, but now called from the door behind me. Neither could have left their respective rooms without entering the hall, and I knew for a fact that there weren't any old-fashioned servant entrances anywhere that could have let them move unnoticed. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Shaken, I took a step away from the door that echoed with Cindy's voice. Cindy? Mr. Todd, she begged from the other side of the oak paneling, the wood slamming against the jamb with wild urgency. Please help me. Please. The door is locked. I tried not to hyperventilate as I watched the knob rattle in its socket, knowing fully well the lock was on her side of the door. Can you let me in? Her wails increased in pitch, the screeches an awful combination of agony and terror that made my stomach churn. It sounded as if Cindy were being tormented in the worst ways imaginable, but something about the cadence of each shriek felt off, enough that my brain sent up warning alarms inside my skull. Mr. Todd, please, she pleaded once more, the same words both girls kept using in various rearrangements over and over, the door shuddering under each blow she made. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and I sucked in a breath, eyes focused on the doorknob as it clacked back and forth, like Cindy wanted to open it but couldn't. An uncanny thought rose in my mind, bone-chilling in its clarity, growing louder and louder so that it burst from me before I could stop it. Cindy. I gripped my flashlight so hard that my knuckles turned white. What's my first name? Like a thunderclap, Cindy's cries ceased, along with Aaron's, so that the entire house fell into dead silence. Nothing moved, and even the muffled roar of the wildfire outside seemed to deaden further than before, as though the house was a vacuum of sound. My skin crawled, the air thick in my lungs, and a strange certainty took hold of me that made the sense of dread even worse as Cindy's words about Aaron trickled through my brain. She's gone. Click. To my right, a doorknob in the far end of the hallway unlocked. Click. Another lock slid open. This one closer, the doors remaining shut as more joined them one by one. Click, click, click. A twinge of panic tightened in my throat, but I leveled the beam of my flashlight at the first door that had unlocked. Blood surging in my temples. Everything seemed loud. The heartbeat in my chest, the breath in my lungs, the groan of the floorboards underneath my boots. My vision narrowed, a vibration hummed to life inside my skull, and I tasted metal on my tongue. In my hand, the flashlight began to flicker as if the batteries were struggling to remain lit, and I couldn't lift my revolver, my arms refusing to move like the gun weighed as much as a car. The locks carried on past me, every door on the second story unlocking itself in the continuous march, until at last the final click resounded from the far hallway like cannon fire to my ears. For a moment, the silence returned, so thick it may have well been water. Wham! Every door on the second story flung open, impacting against the wall inside the respective rooms so hard that I heard plaster crunch, the hinges squealing on old dust. With them came screams. There were hundreds of voices, some human, others less so, bellowing at the top of their lungs to be heard over one another. If they were saying any words, they were lost among the throng, a constant roar of vocals that soured in my ears for the sheer volume of it. Somewhere along the morass, I could barely catch the sound of Aaron and Cindy's voices shrieking with the others, a morbid choir of pain, suffering, and fear. It seemed to seep out of the floorboards, ooze from the heater vents, and rebound off the walls in every direction. With the doors open, the deep orange glow of the flames outside poured into the house like a tidal wave, but oddly enough, no heat came with it. The hallway is cold, as if it stepped into a freezer. The shadows elongated and the firelight swaying as they inched up the papered walls, and a pungent smell followed them. Roses. It came with overpowering strength, sickly sweet but unmistakable as the tide of shadows advanced down the hall toward me. The fermented stink of roses filled the air like a poisoned gas, and I tasted copper on my lips. I have to get out of here. Coughing and the blood running from both nostrils, I stumbled toward the stairs, my head a mess of static, like a tide of slithering vines. The inky shadows pursued me with ravenous hunger. I could feel their magnetic pull, the chorus of screams still ringing across the house with deafening volume, a terrible siren song that tugged at something deep within my subconscious. Voices, so many voices, begged me to stay, to go back, to find the darkest room and sink myself into the abyss until it drowned me. Something tightened on my ankle just as I reached the top of the staircase, and I toppled headlong down the steps. Bam! My hip rammed into the banister, and I lost my grip on the pistol. Another step hit my shoulder, and I felt my teeth bite into my tongue, the flashlight clattering away into the floor below. My head connected with the floorboards at the landing, and the blackness threatened to close over my eyes for the last time. Creak. One of the steps flexed under the weight of a foot, and I gulped air in pain to squint at the shadows. Another creak. Another footstep echoed toward me. Something at the top of the steps descending with a slow, methodical gait. It didn't sound heavy, not in the deft pace of a large man or a thick boot, but almost delicate, light, graceful. Yet there was something about each carefully placed step, each sigh and squeak of the aged woodwork that made my skin wriggle. Something was coming. Something that knew exactly where I was, even in the pitch blackness of the house. It was watching me, stalking me through the shadows like a cat with a mouse. Desperate fear surged in my brain, and I crawled through the dark on my stomach to find a way out. I last remembered the front door being nearby, but it seemed to take an eternity to move across the cold floorboards, the unseen presence mere yards behind me as I wriggled forward. At last I managed to gain my footing, though it hurt to put weight on my right leg, and I hurled myself forward in the blind shadows. Both front doors flew open, and I tumbled out into the porch, rolling down the steps into the stones of the walkway. Like a switch had been thrown, the world seemed to come alive once more, the cold sensation fading, the sound returning. Sirens wailed closer as headlights appeared in the long gravel driveway. The crackle of flames roared from the trees. Smoke filled my nostrils. Heat from the nearby fire licked over my skin, and I rolled into my side to look towards the house. My lungs tightened, and I stared, unable to pull my eyes away. Inside the open front doorway, nothing was visible. Not the glint of firelight from inside, nor the faint glow of it coming from any underground windows. The entrance was a mass of impenetrable shadows that seemed to form a solid wall at the threshold. Yet deep within that abyss, something stared back. I had no shape, no form that I could identify with, but there was definitely a presence that stood just beyond the light, watching me from the gloom. My eyes seemed fastened to it, either by my own primordial fear or perhaps willed so by whatever peered out of the wretched expanse. A torrent of emotions ripped through my mind, warped and misshapen, like cold fingers pried at the taps of my humanity to unleash a maelstrom of feeling, hunger and fear, hate and despair, lust and sadness, grief and pain. They all rolled over one another, tumbling in and out of each other in a never-ending tide, and it hit me with a strangled form of clarity that these weren't my emotions. Locked in place by the unknown being's gaze, I couldn't move, couldn't so much as cry out. My only option to fight back with what little expression I had left. What are you? Something about my terrified thought seemed to strike a chord within the cascade of terrible shadow. For the next instant, the doors of the house creaked in their wrought iron hinges, and they swung shut on their own. The rest of the night was a blur, a stupor, one that I wandered through in a mindless fog, firefighters, crews appearing from miles around to help put out the blaze, but not before it chewed through all 103 acres on the Wickenshire estate. Every tree, every bush, every blade of grass was burned to cinders. Even boulders cracked from the intense heat, the smoke pall so large it could be seen from Montana, or so I heard. One of the fire trucks exploded when its fuel tank caught fire and killed 3 men. Everything burned, except the house. For some reason, the fire stopped at the stone courtyard walls and went no further, and a blaze hot enough that it had turned some minor sandpits on the mountain to crude glass. There wasn't so much as a scorch mark on the house or its outbuildings. None of the paint peeled, the siding wasn't so much as warm to the touch, and all the plants within the yard were unscathed. The investigators couldn't even find ash on the roof from the fire afterwards, not a single flake. Unlike its ruined acreage, the Wickenshire house survived the wildfire unharmed, and no one could make any sense of it. Once the fire was finally put out, they took me to the local clinic for my injuries, a sprained ankle, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion from my tumble down the stairs. Sheriff Kowalski visited in the morning to see how I was, and to fill me in on what I'd missed once they'd trucked me away from the site. Over 300 search and rescue volunteers had been called out, along with special forensics teams from neighboring counties, and they hadn't found any sign of Cindy Fadro or Aaron Martinelli. The last time they managed to ping Cindy's phone via satellite, it had registered a mile up the slope from the house, but they never managed to recover the device. Tracking dogs refused to go near the house and seemed to lose all scent once they left the property boundaries. No trace of Aaron was discovered, and no DNA could be found in either of the girls' rooms to point to a culprit. One of the searchers claimed he had heard what sounded like a female voice screaming for help on the northern slope, but he wasn't sure where it had come from, and no one else could verify it. Another man claimed he saw someone walking inside the tree line near the eastern edge of the property, but never got a good glimpse of their face to see who they were. With all speculation bereft of evidence, it seemed to everyone that both Cindy and Aaron had disappeared from the face of the earth. Worse yet, when I described my account to the sheriff, he informed me that his team hadn't found any symbols painted on the walls, nor did they see anything out of the ordinary. All they found that aligned with my story was the strange, overwhelming aroma of roses that permeated the house. Nothing more. That was 6 weeks ago. I got out of the clinic within a few days after the event, but the continued search efforts proved fruitless. With their investigation coming up cold, the sheriff's office released the house back to Mr. Watkins, who closed it indefinitely. I had never seen him so distraught in my life, as Ed took the girls' disappearance rather hard. He felt personally responsible, though we all knew there wasn't anything he could have done, especially since no one knew what happened to Aaron or Cindy. However, Ed apparently decided to go there himself late one evening to do some looking around the house and didn't bother to tell anyone else. It wasn't until his cleaning lady stopped by his cottage in Jacob's Fork the next morning that Ed was reported missing and police dispatched to the Wickenshire house. They never found him. His car was parked out front and the doors unlocked, but they couldn't find any trace of Edward Watkins anywhere on the property. I helped with the search, as I basically slept in the sheriff's office these days, and found no signs of a struggle or any other foul play, only the smell of roses. We dug deep this time, rifled through local records, archives, property history, everything we could get our hands on about the estate. There was nothing to indicate this place would be trouble, no forgotten building plans with hidden rooms, no land disputes with older tenants, no tribal issues from burial grounds or holy sites. The property was normal, and everywhere we looked, even when I poked around to see if there had been any details, deaths, suicides, or other sordid affairs associated with the house, my search came up blank. There was no reason for this to happen, not from human effort or anything else. Even now, as December drags on, nothing has been the same. No plants grow in the burn zone, not even the smallest patch of lichen or moss. As if the ground is poisoned to its core, animals avoid it so that the uncharted sections of the forest around the property are empty, silent places. The access road is chained off to keep curious locals away, and Sheriff Kowalski let me bunk at a small ranger cabin at the base of the mountain, just so I could keep tabs on the place. I think he knew I needed to be close, to keep an eye on the house and keep looking for answers. I can't explain why, but I know something is in there, waiting, biding its time. It failed to get me that night, but I have a terrible premonition that it doesn't need me. It just needs more. I found markers in the last few days, piles of bones, not haphazard from an animal kill, but stacked, organized, purposeful. Bits of twine made from plant fibers hold them together, and despite being in the open, no animals will bother them, not even the vultures. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. They think I can't process the girls being gone, but I've stumbled over a dozen of them now. They seem to be set in a wide ring around the property line, spanning outward from the house into the forest beyond, capturing more territory by day. No matter how many times I remove them, the piles always reappear, with fresh bones added to the stacks. I don't touch them anymore, and I don't even make eye contact with the empty eye sockets of the skulls. The few times I have, I heard whispers in my sleep, and had nightmares of eyes in the shadows of my room. Some of the bones are like those of a rabbit or mole, while others are bigger, like elk or bear. Every pile is topped with a skull, most of them from small game, but 5 of the piles hold unique skulls: a bear, a coyote, an eagle, a snake, and lastly a great bull elk. They are laid out opposite one another, ringing the house, the rest of the small markers ranging from them into the forest beyond. All of the markers, the one with the elk skull is tallest, its full spread of antlers still intact so that it's 9 feet high at the eye sockets. I found a symbol painted onto the bone forehead with powdered charcoal that the rain never seems to wash away, no matter how many times I go up to it. A spider, one made of 2 slender inverted hands, both the same size. I'm posting this so that it's on record, in case one of these days I don't come back from that mountain. Service was always spotty up there before, but ever since that night, it's been non-existent. Even the few trail cameras I've put up have either gone dead or produced nothing but blurry photos. Something is building these markers, watching me whenever I walk the perimeter, and shifting in the corners of my vision whenever I turn my head. I've discovered trail signs that have been purposefully moved to misdirect me. Sometimes I hear screams in the woods, distant and warped, but they sound like Aaron's cries. I see flashes of blonde hair in the bushes that I want to believe is Cindy, but I know it can't be. They're gone. Both of them. Only the sheriff understands, even if he doesn't say much to that effect. I can see it in his eyes. He knows that I'm telling the truth, and his own deputies have been up to the house to see the piles multiple times. There's nothing they can do, nothing but wait from the valley below and hope the snow buries whatever it is for the winter. There's something wrong with the Wickenshire house, something inside it, something unseen that walks by the grounds day and night. It wants more than the estate. I can feel it, I can taste it in the wind, hear it in the dry crunch of snow under my boots, and feel it in the shivers I get every time I look at the dark, barren windows of the cursed structure. It wants the forest, the trees, the mountain. It wants everything. The end.
Spooky.
Spooky.
Oh, spooky, spooky.
Spooky.
Oh my
Spooky,
goodness.
spooky, spooky.
That
This
was
person,
good.
their writing is so beautiful too. I love
Mm-hmm.
the description they use. Very good.
The entity is an artiste.
I know.
He's a real artiste.
I
He's
know.
creative.
It's very spooky. It very much reminds me of like the adult version of, did you ever see like Haunted House? Like the kids
No.
movie? Oh my
Well,
goodness.
maybe.
It kind of like the children that like the house would come alive and like eat them.
Wasn't
It's
that
called The Bad Children.
Monster House? Or was
Monster
that
House. It
that's a
might be
different
Monster
one.
House. I don't
I think
know.
it might be Monster House.
It's
I don't
something,
know.
but I think it kind of like makes me reminisce about that. Very spooky. The house is
Very
alive.
much.
Something's in the walls.
And he's an artiste.
Mhm.
He's like, let me make a little pile of bones for you. I put it right here.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
is so
He's like,
pretty.
here, I give you totem effigy.
All right. Well,
All right.
mine is a little grosser. I'm so sorry.
That's
Yours is art, mine is icky.
Yours is traumatizing.
Yeah, that's how I roll, baby.
Hell yeah. All right.
All right, so the one I'm going to read, it's called Nada, and it's by Saturday, I believe is how you say it.
Not
Um,
a or nada, like nada.
not a, two
Okay.
words. So they might be adding on to this one. So this
Okay.
is like the first part that they have, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. So, all right, let me make sure my cat's not yelling. Okay. All right, I'm going to start from the top. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. I'm not a liar, not a conspiracy theorist, not a man known to exaggerate. No one's listening. I'm throwing this message in a bottle online, hoping someone relevant picks it up. If you know me, you know. You have my number. Call me. Let me explain. I'll start from the beginning. I'm a South Dakota boy, came from a small community near the bend of the river by Crow Creek. Us, excuse me, us East River folk live by different tempo. We don't get a lot of big headlines, and we keep our dreams close to see them from our bedroom window. I wanted to be a cop like my dad, followed in his footsteps, got my badge. Now I'm a cop too. Before this whole shitstorm started, I'd been doing this job for 4 years. I was no stranger to death or disease, but it's from places you expect. Some guy overdosing outside a fast food joint, a diabetic running a stop sign into oncoming traffic. We see some gruesome stuff. You can't avoid that. Comes with the job. But it's never intentional, you know? It was always consequence of a bad choice or random happenstance or plain bad luck. But one day I got a call about something I'd been dreading. Driver called about spotting something off the road the west of Washington. We didn't get a lot of details, but me and my partner were the closest to check it out. Apparently, they found a head. A human head. Out there, it's all flat. No hills, just the occasional tree blocking the horizon. We could see the guy parked on the side of the road long before we got there. There was a couple of other people there, an old man with a bloodhound, two teenage boys taking pictures with their phones, and a man in overalls that reminded me of a walking blueberry with a sunflower patch on his chest. That was the driver, the guy who made the call. Russell and I parked and got out. Russell's my partner. Had been Had been for about 9 months at that point. We worked well together, but we had no contact outside the work. It's better that way. The few times we've gotten personal, we figured out we were nothing alike, and we have vastly different opinions and experiences. West of the river kind of folks, you know. We go up to Blueberry Guy. He tilts his cap and points at the end of the fence with the butt of a cigarette. Right there, he says. Shit's right there. He was trying to play it off as something casual, but I could tell he was mortified. There were 3 cigarettes scattered around his feet, and at least 2 of them weren't even half finished. He was shaking bad enough to drop them. The old guy in the bloodhound. The old guy with the bloodhound had to hold his dog back. Not that it was angry or anything, but it seemed desperate to sniff the thing. From where I was standing, that's what it looked like. A thing. Not a head, not a person. Just this pale blotch of skin lined up against the fence pole. I was stopping to talk to Chris when I saw it, the driver continued. That's Chris. The old man raised a hand and snapped at his dog, who finally calmed down. I stepped back and called you guys. Barely looked. Not a peep. Russell asked the mandatory questions, establishing a timeline, asking about the witnesses, what he was doing, all that stuff. Meanwhile, I asked the teenager to step back and explain to the old man we had to keep the area clear. I was the first to step up close and take a good look. Someone had to confirm it was a human head. And it was. It was fresh. Young woman, maybe 20, 25 years old, mouth half open, I felt out, as if letting out a long sigh, eyes closed. Without touching anything, I took some pictures. It's important to be able to show a crime scene the way you find it. You never know when the weather's going to take a turn. Made a couple observations. She didn't have any makeup on. There was not a large pool of blood or gore. The head was just sort of propped against a fence, making me think someone left it there intentionally. This was not an accident. No way. It dawned on me that I was witnessing might be my first murder scene. Well, not a murder scene. A murder display, if anything. We called in the cavalry. As I mentioned, things like this don't happen where I grew up. Accidents, yes, but this was no accident. Couldn't be. We had a whole bunch of cars out there in less than an hour. We sectioned off part of the farmlands and checked for further body parts. We got the cadaver dogs. We called the prep for an autopsy. We had crime scene investigators on site by late afternoon. Never seen anything with that kind of mobilization. No, I'm sure they wanted to bring in some expert from Sioux Falls, but time was a factor. We needed early call on whether this death was the result of an accident, animal, or tool. Yes, it all pointed to a murder, but we couldn't know for sure. That wasn't our job. Before anything, we needed an initial statement. We had a coroner and the medical examiner ready. Problem was, these were local guys, and they weren't prepared, not in the least. Me and Russell were sent along to get them sped up to speed on a sort of go-between. We were the first to get there after all. We got the pictures, the initial statements. Also, we knew these people. That made things easier. Russell and I got there before dinner time. The medical examiner had gotten there about 10 minutes ahead of us, but the coroner was already getting work done. The medical examiner was a lady named Corrine. Early 40s, mother of 4, no nonsense kind of woman with a bad but honest temper. The coroner's name was Dolly. Man ought to have retired by then. But he was still going at it, almost 70 years old, but sharp as ever. When we stepped in, he was already turning the head over, making observations about the wound. Dolly, Russell said as we entered, how you holding up? Just dandy, Dolly said, making a note. I'm more worried about our friend here. Corinne pushed us aside and made her way into the examiner's table. Russell got a pretty good shove and rolled his eyes at her. Since you're still looking, I'll take it you haven't come to a conclusion, Corinne sighed. What's the verdict? It's easier to explain what it's not at this point, Dolly said. The wounds are about halfway patterned, halfway something else. But it depends on the time they were inflicted. So, what's the TOD? We talking days, weeks? I haven't got the slightest clue. That made her pause. There were several inconsistencies that Daly noted. For example, several of the usual markers that we see in corpses just weren't there. There were no flies or magnets. Many common shows of decomposition had either not manifested at all or manifested in an order that didn't make any sense. For example, the inner lining of the mouth showed signs of advanced decay around the soft tissue, but there was no signs of bacteria or strong active smells. Dolly couldn't make sense of it. Russell and I stood back and watched them work. We knew Dolly had a habit of not answering his emails or checking his phone, so it was better to have some boots on the ground to keep tabs on their progress. We were all going to be on call for most of the night anyway, so we figured we'd settle in for the long haul. I took a dinner break while Russell stayed behind. He brought leftovers that he forgot to eat for lunch. I got an hour to clear my head and fill my stomach while they kept working. I checked in with the guys still out in the field. They hadn't found anything. No witnesses, no footprints, no tire tracks, no wheels, not a thing. They were checking traffic cameras and going in and out of the area, but the distances required the same amount of cars passing through made the potential numbers go up in the hundreds. I could tell it was a dead end. Hell, I could tell that just by the tone of their voice. By the time I got back, Dolly and Corrine were arguing. They were listing things on a whiteboard, going through them one by one, crossing things off. You could tell who'd written what. Dolly had this old fashioned cursive, while Corrine kept it simple and blocky. The smell of chemicals tickled the ranch sprinkled taste buds on the back of my tongue, making me wish I was back outside. Russ gave me a pat on the shoulder and took a break, leaving me alone with the arguing professionals. Corrine was in the middle of a monologue, pointing at the thing at a time on the whiteboard. Not a hacksaw, not a chainsaw, not a, would you say, piano wire? Not a piano wire, Dolly agreed. Not a knife, not an axe. And we got nothing certain, Corrine continued. Not a fragment, no nothing. Dolly turned to me. You got any ideas? You see anything out there? Anything? Not a thing, I shrugged. Witness statement in the folder. This is shit, Corrine spat, flipping the folder over. Not a single thing we can use. You don't think it was wildlife? I asked. Wolves, bears. We have to find some kind of baseline before we start eliminating things that ain't, Corrine explained. We can't just start listing things it's not. Well, it's better than standing here saying nothing, Dolly argued. Hold on. He flipped the whiteboard over, uncorked his pen, and started at the top. It's not a wolf, he said. What else? They went at it for hours. Not a wolf, not a bear, not a coyote, not a bobcat. Just a long list of things to exclude. They checked for fur, claw marks, teeth marks, anything. All the while, Russell and I went up and down the stairs, calling out the chief to let him know there was nothing to report. By 8 p.m., we were running in circles. We called it a night. Corrine packed up first, then Russell and I got off the clock. Russell headed home immediately, but I noticed Dolly sticking around a little longer. I pretended to look for my keys and I kept an eye on him. He was still talking, but not to me. We're missing something, he mumbled. We're missing something big. Like what? I asked. He looked up at me, snapping at whatever thought he was running through his head. I'm just making conversation. Pay me no mind. All right. Good to lock up? Dolly waved me off with a smile, and I didn't think much else of it. The next morning, we got a call about the feds wanting to join the action. Tried to get a hold of Dolly, telling him to come in a little early, but the man really can't be reached by email or text. He was coming in whenever, and that was that. Corrine, on the other hand, was already there by the time Russell and I pulled into the parking lot. She was leaning against the streetlight, tapping a pen against a notebook. Not a big machine, she mumbled. Not a small machine, not a tool, not a saw. Morning, Corrine, Russell yawned. Trying to get some work done before the feds get here? And she ignored us. We'd gotten the spare key to open. Dolly got the other pair. Corrine wasn't usually the one we called for these kinds of things. Then again, we never had this kind of thing. Not really. The moment Russell clicked the lock open, Corrine shoved her way past him, this time with even more force. It was enough to make Russell go, hey! But she had no visible reaction. She kept mulling over the list she'd made on her notebook. She was eager to get back to it. We only had about an hour or so before reinforcements would come knocking on the door. Corrine wasn't wasting any time. She ran down the stairs, put on the bare minimum equipment, and rushed to pull the slabs out. We barely had time to keep up with her, like she was racing against the clock. But when she pulled the slab out, there was a whole other problem. The head was gone. Russell stood there, mouth agape. He snapped out of it the moment Corrine turned to us, her eyes sunken in red. Something was off. She'd always been a bit short and snippy with us, but this was something else. I don't think Russell saw it, but I could tell she was up to something. She looked from him to me, then at the door. Not a little girl, she mumbled. Not an old lady, not a teenager. You all right there? Russell asked. Sleep okay? I could tell she wasn't listening. There was something about the white of her eyes that bugged me, a sort of micro twitch, like a nervous dog, when she suddenly burst into a sprint. I was ready. Russell wasn't. I stepped in front of her, and she ran straight into me. She knocked herself to the ground, landing face first on the hard floor. I could hear the air pass from her lungs in a huff. I got a pretty nasty landing on the flat of my back, but nothing was broken. Bad bruise, but I got lucky. Russell was on her back within seconds, putting her in handcuffs. Not a snake bite, Corrine mumbled. Not a hound, not a house cat, not a gunshot. What the hell? Russell gasped. What's wrong with you? Not a thing wrong. Not a question answered. Not a long way to go. Corrine, Russell yelled. You hear me? I was already calling in for another squad car. Time was of the essence. We had a missing head, and Dolly wasn't around. Prayed to God he just overslept, but I had the sinking feeling in my gut that he hadn't. There was something the way he lingered the other night that made me think he might have done something he shouldn't. Another car was sent to check on Dolly, but he wasn't at his apartment. Another car went to check his office, but there was no one there either. We ended up combing through whatever contacts might be useful. Russell and I had our coffees, making mental lists out loud. His ex-wife, I said, I know he's got one of those. I don't think he made it to Florida in overnight. His car's still in the driveway. So, not an ex-wife, I said. Not an ex-wife, Russell agreed. Not a chance, not a... I turned and looked at him as he tapered off. He stared at the steering wheel, coffee hanging limp in his hands. His eyes glassed over. I could see a bubble of spit pooling from the corner of his mouth. He wasn't blinking. Russell? He blinked, dropping his coffee straight into his lap. It wasn't that hot, but he was up and about within less than a second, cursing like a sailor. He kicked the cup down the street like it owed him money and got back in the car, wiping the seat in his pants with a blanket from the glove box. You okay? I'm not about to get sick. Not now. You sure? You seem out of it. You really think Dolly took that damn head? Russell said, changing the subject. You think he'd do that? He could have. I mean, it's possible. What are the odds of them both disappearing without him being involved? A snowball's chance in hell. Exactly. Not a chance. I gave Russell another look. He was clearly thinking about something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tapped him on the shoulder and handed him my coffee. I think you need this more than I do. I'll take the wheel for a bit. We spent most of the early day driving around town asking questions. We had a couple of vague leads, but it's like we were spinning tires stuck in the mud. Russell was getting frustrated, so the chief asked us to do something else for a bit. They were busy dealing with the feds anyways, and they had 4 different squad cars out looking for Dolly. We were sent to check on the roadside diner. Old folks kind of place. It had been closed all day, and the waitress's working lunch shift was getting worried. The owner wasn't answering their phone, and there had been no notice ahead of time. There was just a note on the window saying closed. It wasn't a high priority call, but it gave us something to do. That is, until I noticed something curious. We went to check on the place before we headed to the owner's register address for a house call, but when I got closer to look at the sign, I noticed it was written in beautiful cursive. I elbowed Russ and pointed. You see that? He nodded, moving in to get a closer look. Not a common thing around here, Russell said. Owner's got arthritis. You don't think he wrote that? Not a... No, he coughed. Now that I think about it, I think I've seen Dolly around here before. You have? When? Not a... not a long... Russell trailed off, falling silent. Gave him a couple seconds. This time I wasn't going to snap him out of it. I wanted to see what was going on. He stood there for a full minute. I counted. It was a full minute. And then he almost toppled over, tipping forward like a falling tree. That's when I rushed to catch him. If I hadn't, he would have got a face full of gravel. He immediately went on the defensive, straightened his back out. I'm okay, he insisted. I'm okay. You gotta talk to me. I'm okay, whatever. I'm okay. Stop saying that. You keep saying that, and you zone out. Saying what? I blinked. I didn't want to say it. There was something dangerous about it, like turning a key in the door you didn't want to open. I shook my head and headed for the car. Before I got halfway, Russell was going around the back. He wasn't about to wait. He was heading inside, with or without me. I had to stop whatever I was doing to catch up with him. I called out to him, but he was heading for the back door. Before I got to him, he cracked a window and shoved the door open. He was rushing inside with the same urgency that Corrine had, except I wasn't there to tackle him. Last thing I saw before he rounded the corner was him pulling out his gun. I called for backup as I ran after him. I stopped dead in my tracks a couple steps inside the kitchen. The owner was on the floor, face down in a pool of blood. You could smell death on him. Russell had stepped over him, heading straight for the front of the diner. This wasn't like him. Russell was not a hothead, not a thrill seeker. If anything, he was the controlled one. Russell, I called. Gotta step back. Backup's on the way. There was no answer. Instead, he rushed straight to the front and stopped. I followed him, rounding the corner. The blinders were shut, casting the whole serving area in a gray shade. A couple streaks of sunlight made their way through the shutters, lighting up the white spaces of the spots of red. Dolly had been busy. Without a whiteboard, he'd been writing on the furniture with whatever pen was closest. Turned out that pen was blood. The first few sentences seemed familiar. Not a cougar, not a lion, not a panther, not a gator. More animals. But the further you got, the text got smaller, more concentrated, and the sentences grew stranger. Not a lot, not a little, not a lord, not a queen. Then, at the far end, there was something written on the table. Russell was already there, picking something up from it. As I got closer, I saw the text. While trying to keep my eye on my partner, the text was cleaner, underlined. Not a person. Not a person. Russell nodded. Yeah, that makes sense. What is what what's that you're holding? I asked. What are you doing? He dropped the handgun to the floor and cradled something behind his hands. As I got closer, I saw what it was. The bottom jaw of the missing head torn loose. Not a person, Russell repeated. Not a threat. You ought to put that down. We got people coming any second. He looked up at me, elated, this immense sense of relief spreading over his face. It's not a person, he related. It's okay. Not a person, not a corpse. What's not a corpse? What's not a corpse? He held up the jaw, looking me in the eye, and without looking away, he put it to his lips, and bit off a mouthful. It didn't make a sound as I thought it would. Instead, there was a soft, mushy kind of noise, like someone biting a jelly-filled marshmallow. He barely chewed for a second before he got another check. She? He said muffled. It's fine. It's not a person. I kept shaking my head, backing away a little. I didn't even notice I'd pulled my gun. He held the flesh out for me, looking like I'd said something hurtful. Try it, he smiled. Try a little. No way, I said. Not a. I had to stop myself. I had to physically stop myself. Thinking about this sentence made my spiral into a pattern of repetition over and over again. Like an allergic reaction in the back of my mind. I slapped his hands over my mouth, smacking my front teeth with the metal of my gun. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't shoot Russell, but I couldn't stay. I turned away. I hadn't noticed the bathroom door opening, the one in the back near the grill. I hadn't noticed Dolly waddling out of it. Turns out he had a meal of his own. He'd eaten most of the head. Hair was still hanging out the side of his mouth. His glasses were clinging to the tip of his nose. A single good shake would have them falling to the floor. In the dark, his hands looked black rather than bloody, but you could tell from the smell. I ran straight into him, almost knocking him over. He fumbled his steps a little, leaned back against the wall, and braced himself. It's okay, Dolly burped. It's not a person. Not a corpse, Russell added. Not a soul. I could hear myself finishing the sentence. I was just a syllable or two away. I wanted to say it was not a person, too. Not a problem. Not a. Instead, I pushed past Dolly. I rushed forward, leaping over the dead body, and threw myself out the back door. I got a good 10, 15 feet out past the door before I looked back. Dolly and Russell were just standing by the door, looking at me. They weren't chasing me off, trying to talk me down. They just stood there, mumbling the same pattern, the same rhythm. They couldn't figure out what the hell this thing was, though they were just listing things it wasn't. Not of this, not of that. Then I heard something, a dragging sound. And I realized they weren't looking at me. They were looking at something behind me. Something cold and mucus colored wrapped around my eyes like seaweed. I screamed, but only served to open my mouth. Something cold got past my tongue, tickling my tonsils, and I swallowed. I choked as something bitter and meaty swirled down my gullet. It felt like someone had thrown a sack of bricks off a tall bridge, landing hard on the bottom of my stomach. I fell forward, gasping for air, scraping my knees. I was dry heaving to get the thing out of me. My eyes were covered in grease. All I see is this figure. It emerged behind me, moving past me. I barely saw the shape of it, but it had something like a big arm coming out of its side. It looked like a big corn cob, but instead of kernels, there were pieces. The shape of a foot, a hand, a long hair from a scalp. As it moved past me, Dolly and Russell silently joined it. Before they disappeared into the northern field, I heard something snap and tumble to the ground. I got to my feet stumbling. I made it to the bathroom, shoved my fingers down my throat. No matter what I did, nothing came out of it. Something was stuck in the pit of my stomach, and by the time backup arrived, I was sobbing on my knees, bent over a bloody toilet seat. I was screaming into the porcelain, begging for whatever was inside me to leave. but it didn't. They had to drag me out by the arms. It didn't get any of it out. Not a piece. Not a little piece. Not a single little piece. They didn't find Dolly or Russell. I ended up with a 2-night stay in the hospital. Apparently, something similar happened to Corrine. She had a breakdown. They were still trying to figure out the problem. Some sign pointed to a fungal infection, but they couldn't find the cause. The doctor determined that it was not a virus, not a bacterial infection, not a misfolded pyron. They had to put her on an IV. They couldn't get her to shut her mouth long enough to eat. They were still trying to figure me out when I got sent home. They said I wasn't as far gone. Paid leave 3 weeks. 3 weeks turned into 6 as the test results came back inconclusive over and over again. At one point, they thought I had some kind of contagion, but they couldn't say for sure. Someone mentioned narcotics, but it just turned into a long list of negative tests. I switched doctors 3 times, but they kept tripping over their own diagnosis. One of them ended up taking their own sick leave after a while. I've been trying to figure out the way to get rid of this. I sit up at night, staring at the wall, drawing on my cheap wallpaper with a black pen. I want to help them. I want to figure this out. I write what I know to be true over and over. It's not a threat, not a person, not a human, not a corpse. I had to give myself a reason to write again. I've been trying to resist it for so long. It's like whistling a song, you can't stop humming. If you start, it'll be on your mind all day, but I'll just do it. I'll do it until I get it out of my system. I don't care if it takes days, weeks, or months. I'll figure it out. I'll get it out. And once it's gone, I'll be back here trying to figure this out. Not a day, not a week, not a month, not a year, not a threat, not a person, not a killer, not a beast, not a thing. The end.
Oh, not a bad story.
It is kind of gross.
Yeah. It's
It's not.
very interesting though.
Yeah.
I'm like creeped out, but in a good way.
So I think he might be adding more to that one because he seems to write in a
Mm,
series. So
okay.
I will
Well, I would
definitely
be.
be continuing that if he writes
Yeah,
more.
I would.
Yep.
I'm looking forward if they do another one. I want to definitely hear that.
It's definitely
Oh,
interesting. All
all
right. I
right.
think
Well, actually, if you want, there's I think we can go ahead and make sure that we shout out all of the wonderful authors who are gracious enough
yeah.
to let us read their stories. So please, if you are listening, go give them a look. And if you enjoyed these spooky stories, or if you want to submit a scary story to us for us to read, you can send it to the email that we will have linked below or linked around with our podcast. Do you have anything else to add, Fadi?
No, I think that's it. And we'll
All
be
right.
back with more soon. But yeah, spooky
Okay.
times. All
Bye
right. I'll
bye.
see you guys in the next one. Bye.